getting a handle on your money always depends on your circumstances, always. For those who live in rural areas, those circumstances can be quite a bit different than those who live in bigger cities or towns. So, we're going to talk a bit about what that means, what is different with Marissa Epp. She's a farm finance specialist, financial advisor, founder of Epp Financial, and she joins us from Rostern, Saskatchewan to talk more about this idea. Marissa, hello there.
Hi, how are you?
How big is Rostern, Saskatchewan? Do you have a bank branch within
So
walking distance of your house?
we have one left, but I live probably about 8 miles from town, so not technically within walking distance from my house.
Or a very
But
long
it's
walk?
about our town's about 11 or 1,200 people, I
Yeah.
would say.
What are some of the things that you would highlight as differences for rural folks versus urban folks when it comes to money?
Yeah, so I was saying I was in last year I was in Toronto and it blew my mind the amount of people who didn't own vehicles there.
Yeah.
And that is one thing that every budget, every financial plan I see out here, most people have a vehicle payment because if they don't plow the roads for 4 days, like you need a vehicle with four-wheel drive that is reliable because it is cold endlessly and we have to drive everywhere, everywhere.
Certainly in Saskatchewan, there are many, many people who earn a living in agriculture, maybe owning a farm specifically, but not everybody. How would you broaden out our notion of what it is to be rural? What sort of jobs do people have? I mean, you said you're 45 minutes from a big city. Are there commuters who live in Rostern?
Yes, tons. And especially because we're kind of in the middle of two cities. So there are definitely people who live here that travel into Saskatoon or travel into Prince Albert. But we do have one bank branch left here. We do have a grocery store. We have a big like John Deere Brant Center, so lots of mechanics, obviously for all of the farmers in the area. Co-op, fertilizer company. It is definitely very agriculture based for sure.
When we think about farms in particular, that is the antithesis of a job. And for many people, the volatility of harvest over the course of years can be like massive swings in income. What does that present as a challenge in terms of financial planning?
Yeah, it definitely makes things interesting. We say, with farmers, you're going to sprinkle $1 million and pray for rain. And that
Right.
is very accurate. I find with a lot of farmers too, they're all very asset rich and cash poor because they're putting everything they have back into the farm. So it really creates the challenges, especially when they want to go to retire, because now we have to sell in order to get out our money to be able to retire.
Mm.
So, really thinking of different ways if we want to pass this farm on to the next generation, how do we do that without having to sell the farm once again? Because that's typical.
Farming is not like just owning a business. There is
No.
tradition, there is legacy, there is emotion. You're working the land. How do you balance your role, understanding that that temperament is a thing, with like, I'm actually looking at your numbers here, and this business, as much as it is connected to your soul, isn't making money. How do you
You
walk
are
that path?
You are very correct on that. And I've said this to my husband. We have cattle, run cattle. And I've said to him, like, there's so many years where the numbers don't make sense. I'm like, why are we doing this? If this was a Subway and this was our, return on premiums or our profit margin, we would get rid of it. Like it's crazy, but you're right. For a lot of people, it's where they've raised their children. It's where it could be multi-generation where all of your memories are. How do you sell something that your great great grandparents started? And so that very much is a challenge in balancing, what's sensible, but what can we do to maybe make things more profitable and
Mm.
sometimes just changing how it's always been done.
What have you noticed about financial literacy in rural environments? And I don't know that it would be any different than it would be in an urban environment, but certainly life circumstances are different. Is the material out there? Does it speak to the reality of the clients that you work with? Do you feel like the level of financial literacy is on par with what it would be in other parts of the country?
I think that there's a lack of financial literacy in general. I know myself growing up, my parents, they farmed, both sides of their families farmed, and the majority of the financial literacy I was taught was get a job that's got pension and benefits and try and spend less than you make. And that was kind of it. And the farm there was lots of years where it was like, well, we're not going to be able to afford that this year because grain prices aren't great. Or so I think I don't think that there's enough financial literacy out there, definitely
Mm.
driven towards farmers and ag folks, because it's just a totally different way of life.
Yeah. When you look at a traditional, and I'm using air quotes, a traditional financial plan, you're looking at cash flow, and there's a job, and there's after-tax income, and a percentage gets thrown into an RSP, and then there's
Yeah.
relatively predictable expenses, and then there's a surplus or a deficit, and you can kind of tweak that. The approach, and by the way, when you're saving in, diversified low-cost things in Canada, US, international, and there's some fixed income in there. How do you even start when you're working with families for whom that is not the paradigm? Like none of that is as I described.
Yeah, I think that you can only control what you can control, because you're correct. BSE hit the cattle market and all of a sudden cattle prices dropped 60%, and cattle were 70%. They were basically worth nothing. Or tariffs come in and now people are worried about canola prices. They drop off. And so, like I said, you have to be able to control your expenses. I think that's the biggest thing. And I tell a lot of people, you're going to want to base your income on, I don't want to say worst case scenario, but definitely, and not on the good years, because there is far
Mm,
less of those than there
mm,
are bad years, unfortunately. And it's not an easy road, and there's not a lot of small farmers left
mm,
because the profit margins are just tough.
mm.
So helping them to control what they can control.
There are three different models in this country for financial planning. There is commission based. People sell mutual funds. There is fee based, based on a total assets under management of whatever that number is, which is really like a high net worth kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then there's advice only, where financial advisors charge a fee. Maybe it's $3,000, maybe it's $7,000, but there's no investing. Which is your model, and how do you find that works within the clients that you like to serve?
I started as basically commission based. I'm completely independent though, so I can work with any company, both on the insurance investment side. So, I mean, I have a lot of different companies that we can go into ETFs and all that kind of stuff. So I think that really fees for them are fairly the same as other companies who are investing them, but they get somebody that they can call directly. And especially for my rural folks, that's important. We want somebody that we can like pick up the phone and talk to that person and know their names, and they know ours. Like, it's very relationship based
Hmm. I, talk more
here.
about that, because I think that's another difference we haven't addressed here in terms of the community orientation and the values and trust built in a big city. When I was a kid, there was the same teller at the bank branch. If I were to ever go into a bank branch now, which I never do, there's no way it would be the same person two times in a row.
Yeah. And I heard that, especially I worked in the banking industry for quite a while, and I heard that particularly from the rural people. They're tired of telling the same story over and over to a different person. And so that's part of the reason why I started, because I said, then I can be one person and I know where they live and I know their names and I know their children's names and I know what's important to them and I know what their goals are. And it's a small world out here, I guess. I rodeo. So a lot of people that also, rodeo are my clients, and I understand their needs and, what they need for protection and, kind of how they tick.
If you could make one request of the financial services industry to better reflect the needs and wants of rural Canadians, what would it be?
Oh, that's a loaded
I
question.
know. Here, I'll give you if you
Ah,
could snap your fingers and I'll snap them for you. What would be one thing?
Oh, I don't know. That's a hard question. I think honestly, it's just getting to know them. Like I said, we're such relationship-based people, and we refer people to those people that we trust and those people that we know care about us and our families. So I think just taking more time and learning more about those people.
Mm, it's great. Well, thank you for being a part of that endeavor to educate, Marissa. We appreciate you, Marissa. We appreciate you taking the time.
Yes, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Marissa Epp is a farm finance specialist, founder of Epp Financial, and she joined us today to talk about some of the differences between the urban mindset when it comes to your money and the rural mindset.